Greetings to everyone who is now out of our waiting room and part of our webinar this afternoon. We're glad you have joined us. We're going to get started in about 2 minutes. We'll let some other folks get logged on, and then we'll get going. A little bit of feedback here. There we go. Okay. Well, I'd like to welcome all of you here. I know Ken mentioned there was some spotty on the audio. I apologize for that. I'm not sure what's going on. Kurt and I can hear each other well, so and all of a sudden I'm getting some feedback. So you'll bear with me just a second, folks. I think I was having a little equipment malfunction. So welcome all of you to our webinar this afternoon. We're so glad to have Kurt Fuhr, Regional Vice President with Lutheran Church Extension Fund, joining us to talk about how we can get the most out of our demographics, what a great tool these are for helping us engage our community with the gospel. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. There on the left-hand side, you'll see the chat feature. You can go into attendee chat, and if you type your questions in there, that would be greatly appreciated. And you type your questions there. I'll keep track of those questions, and we'll have a little Q&A at the end of our webinar today. And I'll ask Kurt all of your questions. In the meantime, we'll go ahead and get going, and we'll begin with a word of prayer. Gracious Lord, we give you thanks for this day and for the opportunity to be gathered here in this place. And we pray, O Lord, that as we have been given the gift of technology, that we would be able to use that technology, such as our demographics and all the information that we can gather, to know how to go out better and to engage your communities where you have planted us, that we might share the love of Christ with all those folks around us. In the name of Christ we pray. Amen. Kurt, take it away.
All right. Thanks, Todd. I've done a number of these rural small town ministry gatherings, and thank you for asking me to do this, Todd. And the one I'm going to show you today is one that was done about 4 years ago with the RSTM folks. And this is all the data on this one has been refreshed, so it's all new and updated, and I will walk you through this. It can be a lot of information, it can be a lot of data, but just always try to remember that we're trying to connect the dots from the data to how do we minister to these folks, and how to best understand our small town community, and to so we can do ministry going forward. So the information you're going to see is it's called Salem Lutheran Church in a town called Madelia, Minnesota. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second. And this is just a brief devotional thought to start with. This is out of the Old Testament in Numbers, and it's Moses finally at the edge of the Promised Land, and he's going to send the scouts. He's going to send the spies in. He wants them to go into the hill country. What's the land like? What are the people like? What kind of towns they live in? What's the soil like? Bring back some fruit of the land. So you can see the old Sunday school picture with the giant grapes that they're bringing back to show Moses. And if you remember the rest of the story, these scouts, these spies, they came back and they were very afraid of what they saw. It looked very overwhelming to them as far as big people living in the land and big cities. And only Joshua and Caleb said, no, this is God's will for us. He wants us to do this. And God got angry with the rest of them, and they never saw the promised land. So lesson to be learned with taking up our challenges. And this is basically Moses doing demographics, Old Testament style. He wanted to know what he was going to be dealing with, and so he could be better informed as far as what his challenges were. So. Who and how are demographics? LCF, who I work for, uses a vendor called Mission Insight. They're a national vendor of demographics that we subscribe to. So most of our district vice presidents in our various districts have fingertip access online to this data. They can tee up whatever data searches that you need. Mission Insight uses city, county, state government records, census data, housing information. Experian as a credit reporting agency. So whenever you go to like a Home Depot and buy something with a credit card, somebody is legally tracking that information and selling that data to somebody else to use for their purposes. It's all legal, but it's all done for demographic research. So this data is continually compiled and updated as it goes. What is it? It's a service that we provide to congregations. Don't expect to get a bunch of answers, but expect to have a better backdrop of the information as far as the congregation and the community. And we're going to look at things including things like age and ethnicity, income levels, population projections, education, employment information, and then drilling down into the demographic people groups, and then also looking at some charitable giving and religious preferences on the report that I pulled for you folks. And then always be thinking about how do we connect the data to outreach and reaching the community possibilities. This is the data search area that we're looking at, Madelia. If you're familiar with the southern third of Minnesota, Madelia is about a half an hour from Mankato, which is a city of about 50,000. And Mankato is about just over an hour away from the Twin Cities, about 2.5 million people. Madelia is a town of about 3,000 people. It fits very nicely into the dynamics of the rural small town ministry. There was actually a conference that was done at this site a few years ago. So the data that you'll see is everything 3 miles around the city limits, and you're going to see a population of about 3,000. So that fits very nicely into the rural small town dynamic to look at. Just one thing first, a couple things first here, just to show you, are we really missing whole generations in the LCMS? The past 30 years, so in about the mid to late 80s, we have declined by almost 500,000 baptized members in the church body. Only half of the kids that we baptize, we end up confirming. And then after that, only half of those that we confirm are still active by age 21. And this is research that former President Kieschnick did while he was in office. This means that the children we baptize, we're only retaining 1/4 of them by the time they're college age and beyond. So that is a significant issue that nobody has an easy answer for. And we are not alone. There are all the other mainline church bodies are struggling the same fate. So it's not like we're the only one that's having this dynamic going on. This is happening throughout other Christian denominations. And just to give you some context, there are in Minnesota South, which is the southern third of Minnesota, including the Twin Cities, there have been 16 congregations that have closed in the past 16 years. And this is not just a rural setting issue. This has happened in urban, suburban, and rural congregations. So all three of those settings that issue has happened. This is a snapshot of what Salem-Medelia looks like for the past 10 years. This can be pulled by anyone off of lcms.org. It will show you a graphic of baptized, communicant, and attendance, and you can see that there has been some inroads on growing some of the baptized and communicant membership over the past 10 years, but you can see what's happened to attendance since about 2010, 2011. This is a very, very typical graphic of probably 80% of our congregations, kind of this flat and declining kind of dynamic going on. And not just in rural, again, this is happening also in suburban and urban congregations. A little summary information of that graphic that I just showed you, looking at about a 15% drop in baptized, an actual increase in communicant, but about a 50% drop in attendance. And the attendance needle is really tough to move in this day and age because in our understanding of regular attendance, we think that's every week, but regular attendance is becoming like a once or twice a month thing for many people. So it becomes really difficult to move your attendance figures. And you can see there's actually been some inroads with this congregation with some adult confirmands and baptisms over the past 10 years, which is wonderful. But also look at their total contributions, which is their income for the past 10 years. It's been about a 1.5% drop from 10 years ago, which clearly shows you income is not growing. It's actually kind of flat and a little bit of a decline. But the other dynamic going on is that there's been a 40% increase in contribution in gifts per worshiper. So the per worshiper contribution is going up from about 1,500 per worshiper to over 2,000 per worshiper. And that is a very familiar dynamic as congregations contract and lose membership, that the fewer people there that are remaining are giving more to keep the ministry going. So that's a very typical thing that goes on. We're going to look at 12 insights on what's called an executive insight report today. And you can see, I'm not going to read all those 12 for you. You can look at those yourselves. We're just going to walk through each one of these, and I'm going to show you what to look for in each of these settings, and just to show you the dynamic of what jumps off as far as what I look for when I look at these 12. So let me just walk you through these one by one. Population and household trends. Here we want to focus on the population information. The census data from 2000 to 2010, we actually see about a 4% decrease in population for this 3-mile radius area around Medelia. For 2016, that estimated population has actually bounced back by about 1% and projected out to a 0.2% increase out to 2021. So the good news here is we don't see a population hemorrhaging like we see in some areas of rural Minnesota. This area is remaining relatively stable, which is a good thing with population. It's probably close enough where it could actually be a bedroom community of Mankato, so that's probably a good dynamic for them to keep that population stable. The racial and ethnic trends, insight number 2, we want to focus on the percentages here and what is happening there. The white population is actually only 76% here, but it has dropped by it's only by 0.3, which is not a big drop. But look at the Hispanic population of 21%. This is a typical thing in some of our small towns where there's large Mexican populations who are doing some of the blue-collar jobs in the packing plants and things like that. And keep in mind that this is 21%, but also keep in mind that this is about 600 people in a radius search of about 3,000 populations. So just to keep those numbers in mind, along with the percentages and you can see a very small percentage of Black population, American Indian, and Asian. There are limitations to the census data because the questions aren't precise enough. So with Black population, we don't know whether that's African immigrant or African American. In some of these small towns, you'll see pockets of maybe Sudanese or Somali who are coming in to work at some of these plants. You don't see that in this town, but you do see Mexican population coming in for those types of jobs. The age trends of focusing on the average age trend compared to the state. The age distribution, when you look at Madelia, the average age is almost 41, comparing that to the state of Minnesota at 39. And then the median age, which I prefer to look at as the median age. If you remember your math, the median, half are above, half are below. So it gives you a more balanced number. The median age in Madelia is 39 compared to the median age in Minnesota of 36. So think to yourself, what does that average and median age look like in your own congregations for comparison purposes? And the next slide will be a little more telling because it gives you a distribution on the phase of life as of 2016 in this area. And you can see what jumps off the page here is the population over age 55 and 65. We're looking at about 1/3 of the population over age 55, which falls in with the last slide that we saw. And you can see the supply of small children is only 5%. And just mentally kind of give yourself kind of a sense of how do you think that breaks out in your own congregation? Does your congregation look like the area, or does it look like something different? These are the school age trends, and this, again, we want to focus on the numbers here because percentages can be misleading in a smaller population. The early elementary numbers are actually, you can see that's projected to drop with the younger age, to be picked up in the later elementary age. By 2021, that number will be increasing. And then the high school numbers look like they'll stay pretty stable. So again, stable, steady population here. So that's working out well for the overall population, but we're seeing a loss of the youngest kids in this scenario. Household income. Household means typically 2 wage earners about half the time. So that number is bunched together for a combined income. I like to group these into these 3 categories. So household incomes less than 35,000 is 1/3 of the households, and then a very even distribution as you go further up the income scale. When you look at the average household income, it's over 70,000 per household in this area, which is higher than what we see in the Minnesota median income. Now, the average income would be closer to this number. So keep in mind that median and average average is going to always skew higher. And you can see the differences in the Minnesota median and the US median on where those stand. Household and children trends, looking at the household percentages with married couples compared to single parents. That percentage is not going to really change going from 2016 out, projected out to 2021. Keep in mind that traditional marriage, married couples, that number is going to fall below 50% within the next 5 to 10 years in this country. So married couples will actually be a minority of the population, but that's also not taking into account the actual definition of marriage, which is really a fast-moving target in our culture. So what does marriage mean? We have a different understanding compared to the culture clearly on this issue. And then ministry to singles, and we're very good at ministry to married and family units in our churches. The ministry to singles is a little more challenging. Marital status, you can see how that shakes out. Married couples is 55% of the population, but what about the ministry to those who haven't been married yet? That's almost 30% of the population. Or to the folks who have gone through divorce or who are widowed. Those are subset numbers that also need some attention as far as how we approach that in ministry. Okay, adult education. We're looking at the 2016 percentages of bachelor, and I combine those together, bachelor and graduate degrees. So those two combined in 2016 comes to 19% of the population. The state of Minnesota is a very highly educated state. A third of the population is college educated or greater. And that is higher than what we find in the US on average. And my point here is that know your audience as far as your how preaching and teaching is approached in a congregation. If 19% of your population is college educated, probably looking for messages that are more practically driven with story examples. Dazzling folks with more and more Greek, maybe not the answer in this kind of setting. Population by employment. You can see what is happening here. That's a typo. That 2013 should be a 16 on this one. Sorry about that. But you can see that the white and blue collar population is very evenly balanced, just with a slight nod to the blue collar. And you can see in Minnesota as a whole, influenced obviously by the Twin Cities population, the white collar population is almost 2/3 of the entire state population. And there's some breakdowns in the different jobs, and I just categorize those for you on the bottom. A mosaic household type. The mosaic is actually their name for, once we drill down into the people groups, beyond just the surface data. And what I do is there's like 70 of these segments, and we certainly don't want to look at all these, but we want to look at the ones that constitute a majority of the population of this area. So there are 3 of those that come up to almost 60% of the population, and they give them cute names so you can tell them apart, and they categorize them by a letter and a number. These are sorted in alpha order by affluence. So an A group is going to be more affluent, and the S group is going to be very economically challenged. So you can see where the biggest group here in Medelia is. It's in this J, which is about in the middle of the alphabet, compared to A. It's closer to A than it is to S. This biggest group is called the settled and sensible. It's a senior group, 40% of the population. You can see the comparison in the state of Minnesota. So you definitely see the population skewing older in this area, which is pretty typical in a small town. This is your young family group. This second group called diapers and debit cards, kind of a cute name. And then this third group is called town elders. So if you lump this town elder group in with the settled and sensible group, you're looking at a population in the high 40, almost like 47% of the population is seniors in this 3-mile radius in these first 3 groups. So you can see where the population is heading and skewing with older folks in this area. Want to show you just some brief descriptors of 2 of these groups. The 2 senior groups we're going to just lump together because they're going to be more similar than not. But this settled and sensible group, this is older middle class and empty nesting couples living in rural towns. And you can see the artist's depiction of what that looks like and some of the key features of this segment: humble living, stable lifestyle, limited savings, modest spending, retired, limited internet activity. So that's kind of their profile. Here's some descriptors also. This is how you can best communicate with this group, and these different icons represent different ways to communicate. You can still reach this group by good old-fashioned surface mail. A snail mail through a letter is the best way to reach them. All these, the rest of these are much less. And you can see some of the descriptors here as far as income and household size, two-person households. Children are either older or out of the house. And this bell curve here on technology, they are labeled as novices, which means that their kids or their grandkids come over and program their DVR players and set up their TVs for them. So that's a very typical thing in this day and age, that the technology just gets beyond some of these folks. These are some additional descriptors as far as a religious perspective on the settled and sensible group. God's mission, our community, my church. So there's a lot of ownership in being in a church. Key behaviors, deep roots. These folks have been in these towns like Medelia for a long time. They settled here. They've probably raised kids here. They've probably been here 30, 40, 50 years. Keep it simple. They enjoy their grandchildren. They're local, they're traditional, and high devotion of family, high importance of religious faith. Well, that's a group that is going to be very dialed into our church settings with what ministry looks like. This is the younger group. This is a diaper and debit card group. This is 12% of the population compared to the 40-something% of those two other groups. These are young working class families and single parent households living in established places in small towns. You can see there's a single mom here. There's a young family here, kind of a more modest starter home. Rural living, bargain hunting, reality TV, early childbearing years, and child rearing, and just some simple likes as far as what they like to do, because there probably aren't a lot of resources to do anything else. You can see the way to reach them here is messages on their phone or messages on their computer, and also via email. And those are all electronic means that you could reach these folks best. You can see they're young, they're in their 30s with young kids and larger households, not as large of an income. And you can see on the technology scale that these are considered wizards at the very other end of the bell curve. Technology is very natural to them. They grew up with technology, so they're very comfortable with anything that's being thrown at them as far as any tech needs. Very similar profile as far as when you look at these three issues: the religious perspective, God, family, and country; key behaviors, outdoorsy, multiple vehicles, religious. So it gets very dialed into how you could reach these folks. As far as always be thinking about ministry application here. These are traditional and dutiful folks, or followers, high devotion of family, again, just like the older folks, and high importance of religious faith. So these folks would be very receptive to, if they're not in your churches, they'd be very receptive, I think, to a religious message and an invitation to church. This is the charitable giving practices portion of the executive insight. This focuses on what people are giving to different things. And the one that I pull out of here is religious giving of $200 or more. And that is showing in about just under 1/3 of the households. What you need to know here to put this in context is that typical giving in congregations is about 2 to 3% of household income. When you see a higher level of income at maybe 4 to 5% of income for any given congregation, it's probably because they have a school that they're supporting. But this doesn't mean that everyone gives at 2 to 3%. but it means that that's what the average is. And there's in most congregations, there's about 20% of the folks who give about 80% of the dollars to keep the ministry going. So there will be tithers in here mixed with those who are less than that and those who are just beginning to understand how to give. This is the religious program and ministry preference, and you can look at, I pulled out here what people consider very important and compare that with what you find in the US. And these are folks looking for religious and spiritual programs, community activities and programs, and then community involvement and advocacy. These are things that we should all congregations should be interested in these things. And we've got people who are ready to jump in and be engaged in these three things in this community. So that's a good thing. We have challenging numbers here in some respects, but we also have a lot of hope and a lot of optimism of what people are looking for. These are just some possible discussion and next step questions, and these can be addressed in maybe our discussion or just kind of food for thought. What was something affirming? What was something you already knew about this community or about your own? What was something new you learned today about a rural small town community? And based on these demographics, on this data, what possible new ideas can this congregation use to better serve its community? And I will end with a verse. This is Paul in Corinthians, and though he is free and belongs to no man, he makes himself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible, becoming all things to all men, so that by all means he might save some. So he was uniquely qualified as both a Jewish scholar and a Roman citizen. So he could speak to an audience in the synagogue, and he could speak to the audience in the marketplace. And I have to think the style of that message was probably a little different, but the substance was always about Jesus. So doing all things that he could to reach as many folks as possible with the gospel message. So that's what I've got. I'll throw it back to you, Todd, as far as what questions or comments have been accumulated, and we can kind of walk through that. So.
Okay, good. And Kurt, I really appreciate you sharing those questions. Those are really good questions to start asking yourself and your groups, your leadership groups, as they walk through this demographic process. If you have any questions, make sure you type them over in the chat feature. I'll address those with Kurt at this time. Otherwise, I have just a couple of maybe simpler questions, Kurt. How can someone go about getting this Mission Insight report?
Like I said, every district, and if you don't know where your district is, go to lcms.org, and you'll find a map configuration of the various 35 districts around the country. And when you find that, you can go to the LCF website, lcef.org, and you'll find a district vice president in each one of these districts, and you can contact them directly, and they will pull demographic data for you. If you want them to actually present it, you can ask them to do that as well. If you just want the data, they can generate that for you. They can send it to you. But if you want them to come and help you interpret that on site in a presentation format, they can do that as well.
Very good, thank you. Just kind of an addendum to that. If you happen to be in a district that doesn't have LCEF, please contact our office directly. We are able to get at least the quick insight report directly from LCEF, and that's something that we're able to do. We've got some great folks there in the home office that help us out. So just contact us directly at RSTM. Another question that maybe folks might have is how does one choose a study area? I know you did I think 5 miles around Madelia. Maybe how did folks choose that?
Yeah, in a rural small town configuration, typically a radius search is something that's going to work pretty well, because there is some distance between the churches. Maybe I can go back to that slide. Will that get back pretty quickly? Bear with me. trying to give you guys vertigo, but want to just show you the map real quick. There we go. So this is Madelia, and this is a 3-mile radius. So 3 miles in every direction gives me that 3,000, just under 3,000 population. Now you can see just off in the distance here, here's St. John's Lutheran Church. That is a sister congregation out in the country. And curiously enough, that's probably about 7 miles away from them, 7 or 8 miles, which if you know your railroad history, that's about the distance that a tank of water could go before it needed to be refilled. So it's no accident that you see towns about 7, 8 miles apart out in the small town areas, because those towns are still there. Because that's where the railroad needed to stop next. But this gives you kind of a good snapshot of enough of a population area to pull in not only what's in the town, but folks living outside of the town. And if it's not enough population, then you can just make the circle a little bit bigger to pick up enough population to make the demographic worthwhile. So if you're only pulling maybe 1,000 people in a 3-mile radius, maybe bump it out to 5 miles or even 10 miles to get up to enough critical mass to just get a better set of data. Does that make sense, I hope?
Oh, very good, very good. And
Okay.
it's my understanding too that you can, it doesn't necessarily have to be a radius. You can, if you've got maybe a river that separates an area where
Right.
you
You
definitely
can do
wouldn't have.
You can do what's called a custom boundary, which is any kind of odd-shaped polygon that you need to put together based on, like you said, if there's a geography there with a river or a major road or some area that you want to avoid, you can make the box whatever shape you need to make it for your own purposes to avoid something or to understand where the driving patterns are. And that comes into play more in the metro area where you've got churches that are in specific neighborhoods or areas that people don't cross to come back this way or that way. So just use whatever fits best for the environment that you're in. And the radius search will work nicely in this configuration. We could do it differently, but we wouldn't necessarily have to in this one.
Very good. Just another question I had. If folks want to look at maybe a neighboring community where we don't have a church presence, or perhaps want to start a Bible study or something like that, would that be something we could do?
Absolutely. You just need to give us the name of the town or a crossroad of what highway and what main roads, what intersection do you want to look at? Yeah, so we can look at whatever people's needs are, we can pull up data for. It doesn't need to be at a specific church location. It can be wherever you want to look at any other data as well. Yeah,
very good. Warren Prochnow had a question here. He says, without trying to create a program, in quotations, are there suggestions of activities and strategies that have been used to teach or reach these different mosaic types? For example, I have the demographic report, and the largest mosaic is the pastoral pride. I kind of smiled about that because pastoral pride comes up in almost every single one of our rural small town demographic studies. So any suggestions about that, Kurt?
Well, and that's I believe that's another older profile.
Sure.
Of seniors. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you really, like I said, I don't have specific answers for you so much as I have just thought starters. What are the ministry needs? What are these folks looking for? And you can see in some of the descriptors that I pulled up in a similar profile, these folks are looking for traditional structure and fellowship and congregations that believe in things strongly. How could you reach out into the community and serve these folks? I mean, if you got some of these older folks in the community, um, are there some just some practical things? Are there some meal delivery needs? Are there some uh, upkeep things if they're still in their homes that your youth group could go do some raking or painting or something like that? Uh, you know what or even looking at your church itself, is there a half a flight up to the sanctuary off the street? Are there ways that is the only bathroom in the basement? We've got some older churches that are not really very handicap accessible, so there's ways that you could make improvements to your facility to I know that I've talked with some churches where there's probably 4, 5, 6 people who simply can't come to church because there's steps that they can't negotiate up to the church or down to the bathroom or whatever. So that's something a church could look at, say, okay, how could we be more accessible to folks who aren't able to come to worship right now? So those are just a couple practical thoughts that you could think about.
Yeah, very good. I know there have been congregations with maybe an older demographic in their community, and they've started an older adult group. Whereas you might find that
Right.
there's a big chunk of young people that nobody is attending to. So you might start a Parents' Day Out thing or something like that. So
right.
I do.
Well, and look.
Oh, go ahead.
And look at the younger group that we looked at. Just like you said, these are folks who, if you offered maybe some free babysitting services, that would be a way to serve them in a way that would not only be practical but a loving thing to do for them.
And you start to build those relationships where you can start to share the gospel with them. Yeah, exactly.
And I think in some of the information that you cover in these conferences, Todd, you talk about things like what's called like asset mapping, where
Correct.
you look at what are the resources that a community has, and if you've got a church that's got a nice fellowship hall, kind of an assembly space, that might be the nicest gathering space in that town. And are there opportunities to use that space for not only for the church but for events and opportunities in the community as well?
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, that asset mapping, you kind of put that together with the demographics. It makes a nice pair, because you can take what are the needs in the community, what do we as a congregation have to offer, and how can we figure out a way to mesh the two. So yeah, very good. Very good. I don't see any other questions. If you have any, plug them in there really quick now. A huge thank you, Kurt, for coming on with us today and sharing with us your expertise on demographics. A couple of housekeeping items just to let you know. You will receive, hopefully, Amy, our project coordinator, who normally takes care of all the logistics stuff with this. She is out on medical leave. So I've done the best that I can, trying to be as technical as I can, but that's usually her baby. But you should receive a link to a survey and also a link to receive Kurt's PowerPoint from today. If you don't receive those things, if you want a copy of the PowerPoint, please just email us at rstm@lcms.org. That's rstm@lcms.org. I'd be glad to send that out to you or contact Kurt. He'd be glad to help you out with any information you might need as well. And you saw his contact information on the beginning of the PowerPoint. Again, thank you very much, Kurt. We have a couple more webinars coming up in the near future. On the 21st of September, we're looking at disaster relief training with Reverend Ross Johnson, Director of Disaster Relief. On October 26th, spiritual warfare will be presented by Dr. Robert Bennett, who's written a couple of books on that topic. And also in November, on the 16th, we'll look at recognized service organizations, which is another way that we can partner with some folks that we can so we can do some of these things. I just noticed here we've got Warren added, just adding the information. Mission Insight has some summaries of the mosaic types. Yes, they do, and you can actually access those online. So that's an excellent way to take a look at that. He said he just discovered it by doing a Google search. You can learn just about anything doing that. So, yeah, but with your report, they're on there, and that's very easy and very helpful to you to understand what's going on. Don't forget our National Mission Conference, November 9th through the 11th at the Hilton Kansas City Airport. Standing on our heritage, it's still all about Jesus, and we'd love to have you there. We've got a limited number, but we've still got a few discounts available for some folks and some housing grants. So take advantage of that. And and so we'd be glad to see you there. Other than that, that's all we've got. Again, thank you, Kurt. God's blessings, and
My pleasure.
thank you all for joining us today. May the Lord bless you in your ministries, and as you seek to serve Him and reach out to those around you with the gospel.
Thank you.